And
now, turn
down
the lights.
You're
listening to
Somewhere in
Dreamland.
Welcome back, dreamers. I'm your host, Ken Mark, and you're listening to Somewhere in Dreamland. Be sure to check out the show on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, the UNX Network, and on the Dreamland website at www.dreamlandpodcast.weebly.com. Tonight, my guest is Anna Maria Manalo. Anna is a screenwriter and the author of 4 books, including Portals, A Lifetime of Paranormal Experiences, The Way Through the Woods, and Haunted Heirlooms. During her writings, Anna has traveled to over 27 countries, collecting witness encounters, paranormal happenings, and brushes with the unknown. So, Anna, welcome back to the show. I'm super excited to speak with you today. You've been absolutely cooking since the last time you were on. Somehow you've written 2 books in that short amount of time, and one of them is released, Haunted Heirlooms, and one of them's on its way very soon, Unholy Structure. And I was asked to be part of the crew that you assembled to read and review both of these books before they were released. And I must say, first of all, you have to be the hardest working paranormal author out there. And second of all, thank you for letting me be part of that fantastic crew, because I'm having a blast with it.
Well, thank you, Ken. I'm so glad that you enjoyed the book. I really, it was something where I just had to write it all down after all those years of going to those people's stores and, you know, just really perusing their things. You get to know people in the unexpected ways. You don't realize after a while you kind of like feel like a family member to them, so much so that they disclose some things behind the scenes that are happening in their shops. You know, and that's how Haunted Heirlooms got put together. Basically, these people shared with me all the things that were going on with some antiques that were pretty precious to them. And I'm glad you really enjoyed that book.
Oh, I did. Absolutely. And collecting these stories and visiting these shops, and after reading, you know, the book, the first story in the book, you're kind of an avid antique collector, aren't you?
I actually didn't start that way. And, you know, for people who are listening, this all started because I loved going to flea markets. And the way I went about looking for things that I thought might be unique or might have some value is to actually go to flea markets, thrift shops, anything that's out there. I happen to be in an area at the time, this was in the 80s, I was a college student. I was an extremely tight budget. I was with a group of friends who also liked to shop. But, you know, for the most part, some wanted to go to the department store, and there I was going to outdoor shops and flea markets trying to see if I could find something that was interesting and different. So that's how my interest in antiques developed. And it started with looking at furniture, if I could afford furniture, because I was living in a pretty shabby dorm at the time. And, you know, Ken, when you're in a dorm, everything looks the same. You go from one room to the next, and basically people either have a bunk bed or, you know, like they're just basically like just making do with whatever furniture is given to them.
Sure.
So one day I was inspired to go to a flea market in search of something that would make the room more distinctive, more homey, you know, more, you know, because I was going to be there for the next another 3 years, you know, as a sophomore at the time. And so one day a friend of mine who happened to have a Beetle, and, you know, they don't make them anymore, but this was, you know, in great condition, he let me hitch a ride in his car, and off we went looking at different flea markets, and I stumbled upon this bargain. And it was a beautiful wing chair. It was in excellent condition. It had this beautiful brocade fabric, and there were no rips, tears, or stains on it. It had this beautiful color, and it had like this beautiful flowered pattern. But not to belabor the point, I asked the gentleman who was selling it, and I was really floored when I found out that he was only selling it for like $36, less than $40.
Oh, wow.
So being the poor student that I was, I went ahead and bought it, didn't even think that there was anything else to it. And you got to remember, we were all young. And, when you're young, not everybody is, but I tended to be impulsive. And next thing you know, it was in the Beetle, brought it back to the dorm, and I plunked it down right by the window, the only window in the room. And it made the room feel, I guess, cozier, more distinctive. At the time, I wasn't really very sensitive to a vibe, you would say, the kind of feeling you normally get when there's something to an object that you don't see. But that was probably the first quote-unquote antique I ever owned. And to this day, when I talk about it, I still get a little, that kind of queasy feeling, that kind of heaviness that I got after the next subsequent nights when people started experiencing things around it.
Yeah, I'll bet. I know what it's like to have to look for that and to pinch pennies and you think you're getting a deal, and then boom, it hits you with a little bit of paranormal reality,
Yeah, and it's funny because like even with people buying homes, you got to kind of wonder, when they're buying something really cheap, and you've seen that in the movies. They're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm not going to walk away from this. Let's buy this really nice old house. And the next thing you know, whatever it is has attached to them. And that's the problem with these haunted objects. These things that are, they're beautiful, they're very rare. In a lot of cases, because they are rare and they're in good condition, people just want to own them when they can afford them. And there's always something behind it that you have to watch because you don't really know the history. You don't really know who the owners are, what happened to them. And apparently, in this case, this particular chair was owned by a woman. And this is way back when they used to wear flappers. That's how old the chair was.
So about the 20s, right?
Yeah, the 20s, which was my grandmother's era. And in the next couple of nights, people started seeing this person come out of my room. And I was the type where I spent a lot of late nights at the library. And I had to take a bus to get back to the dorm because it was the furthest point on campus. And upon getting out of the bus, the room advisor was standing there waiting for me and a couple of girls from the dorm, telling me, hey, you're supposed to sign in a guest when they come in. And it's like, but I don't have a guest. I didn't invite anybody. And the one girl said, no, someone just walked out of your room. And the first thing I thought of was someone had either stolen something, someone else's guest. And they started describing to me this woman who came out, who was totally dressed. She had a hat on, the whole thing, the high heels, everything. And I knew then there was something else that was going on.
Sure. Did you ever get any feelings in that room after the first little notion that was something going on when you were there alone, say? Did you ever get any weird feelings?
I started getting activity. And what I mean by that is I first wasn't really seeing anything out of the ordinary. First of all, I couldn't believe that something like that could happen, in that particular dorm until people started having encounters with the thing. And then, I one day had dropped something on the floor, and I distinctly smelled the perfume and sensed something was sitting, or someone was sitting on the chair. And not to give away the entire story, but when other people started to get involved and someone actually got hurt, that's when not just me, but the rest of my friends decided it was time to get it out of the dorm. We even got it was a Catholic school. It was a Catholic university. We got the clergy, the ministry involved, because I no longer could deny that there was something to it. I was trying to figure out whether I could hold on to it by just getting it blessed. But apparently getting it blessed made it worse.
Oh, wow.
We had to take the chair out of there, take it off campus before something, like I was afraid I was going to get expelled because of what happened to the nun. And I won't go into that, but, there was something that happened. The other wing of the dorm, if I could just explain, the dorm is L-shaped. And one side of that L were the students. And it was composed of 4 floors. And on the other side of the L were nuns. It was actually a cloister for nuns. They were allowed to leave and go about their day and do whatever, jobs they were responsible for. And then that was their housing. And they were allowed to cross over to our side because technically the university was renting from them this building. So some of them were very modern. They would jog at night or walk at night and, do things that normal women do. And that's when things really, really came to a head, when someone encountered whatever that woman was that was in my room.
That's a very, very unnerving story, really. You go and purchase something because you're low on money and you just want something nice and something that sets your place apart. And then you get this surprise and it's just not fun. It opens your eyes. And I do want to touch on something else that you said there. When you dropped something on the floor and you smelled the perfume.
Yeah. And how like when you have a cologne or a perfume that's in a bottle, it has a scent. But then when someone puts it on, the scent changes because it kind of connects with the chemistry of the person's body. The scent of the cologne was such that I smelled it like it was connected to a human body. That was the difference, and that was the part that I really couldn't get out of the room fast enough at that point. And I started dreading. I was working part-time at a hospital as well on weekends. And so I was really just using the dorm as a place to sleep. And sometimes, I'd pop popcorn and have some friends hang out in there. But after that, I couldn't convince anybody to go over there. And then I myself started dreading going back.
Sure.
Yeah, because and then that was the point when I started to lose sleep. And I started to think, okay, someone now is involved. Something has happened. And so all the attention was now on our wing. I had to get it out of there. And that's when things really escalated, because with anything, even with the current book that I just finished writing, it seems like when you move things, change things, whatever these entities are, they do not want to be disrupted. They don't want any change at all in their environment. Sure.
I mean, nobody really likes change in life either,
right.
So
who moved my cheese, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So the perfume thing, when people think of hauntings, they think of seeing a ghost or seeing an orb or seeing something, They don't always associate smells with hauntings, but I think that's a big part and a really good observation for people when they're investigating is changing of the smell, because environments, I think, can be haunted as well. And things, even if they're 100 years old, if they have an attachment, they can take on that smell, that regularity that the person that's attached to, or the spirit that's attached to, had in life as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because there's another story in Haunted Heirlooms that has to do with a woman who, when she was telling me the story, she still can recall how much she gets very scared when she smells lavender. The lavender for her conjures memories of the antique shop and what was in it that infested them for months. It's amazing how a ghost can manifest not just by making you feel their presence, but it also comes in, through scents.
Sure.
And it is one of those things where it might even have, like in the second story in the book, I start the book with my own experience, but the second one
was terrifying. That story was scary.
Yeah. That one had a guardian. That's what I call it. I don't know. The lady didn't know what to call it. No one really knew what to call it, but I called it a guardian. Whatever it was that was in the urn, I won't give it away, had a guardian that came with it. So when it was delivered, it came with a guardian. And the guardian was larger than the Bernese mountain dog. And if people know what a Bernese is, they're usually about 120 pounds. They're beautiful, large dogs. And this creature that came with it that they saw was much larger than the Bernese.
Yeah, no way. I'm out. I'm checking out. I want anything to do with that.
No, not at all.
That story made me want to turn the lights on in the room that I was reading in. I'm like, I'm going to get up and turn the lights on now, because I started hearing some scratching, I thought, and I just got creeped out. It was very good. It was a very good story.
The part that really scared me there, she said, when it was a lady that was telling me, the wife, she woke up from a dead sleep, and, someone was knocking on the door, and it was supposedly the maid. And there was a woman standing there, didn't say a word to her, and it was a doppelganger of the maid.
Oh, wow.
And then the next thing she knew, she's standing in the hallway, and lo and behold, there's the antique. How did it get up on the second floor?
Yeah, that's creepy. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. You know what else I don't like? I don't like the fact that she had a maid, because I don't have a maid. I'd like to have a maid. I'll even take the doppelganger maid. If she wants to send that over, it cleans my house. I'm good with that.
Yeah, I'm telling you. I think she sent her to do all the dirty work. I'm just joking. I don't want to have her hear that. But
So how many stories did you actually collect over the years about objects that were possibly haunted or had attachments that didn't actually make it into the book, Anna?
Well, what I did was I went through probably, I would say there's probably more than a dozen stories. And there were some that were more like, I got this feeling, and then the doorknob kept moving. There was one about a haunted door. The door itself was an antique. And the doorknob, when you touched it, the temperature changed and it would move. And to me, it wasn't really, not to discard it or disparage it, but it wasn't really visual enough.
Sure.
It didn't really speak to me as being strong enough of a story. So that one I didn't include. There was one about a chest, and there's a story of a chest that made it to the compilation. But there was one about a chest that had a wedding gown inside. But the story was kind of fractured. It wasn't really telling me much about the histories, because what you're doing is you're interviewing and you're trying to get all the facts, and the person didn't have enough of the facts. They just knew that there was something where, sometimes the gown would be outside of the chest as opposed to inside the chest, but who owned the gown?
Right.
So some of them were incomplete stories, or I guess some of them were stories that were not evocative enough. And so the ones that made the final cut, the final four, I would say, were the ones to me had some kind of volume of continuity. It was like one thing was happening after another. There was an escalation. And what made it easy, too, is that there were other people who were involved, who made it more three-dimensional for me so that I could actually tell the full story. There's one there, and I don't know if you recall it, Ken, is the one in Rhode Island.
Oh, yeah.
The antique owner in Rhode Island is actually the father of one of my classmates who was involved in the seance in the first story. I got a lot of material from him. He's a wonderful friend. He's now a psychiatrist. He lives out in California. No name mentioned, of course. But his father ran an antique store with his mom for several years and years and years. And with that one, not only did I get the story from his father's side, I got it from his side, because he traveled with that antique, the barrister's bookcase, I believe. Oh, no, wait, I'm trying to think of which one it is. I think it is the bookcase, if my memory serves me right.
Yep.
They had to encase it in fabric, try and secure it in the back of a truck. So my classmate's story was incorporated with his father's story. And there was also the story of the truck driver who brought it into the store. So it helps to have several different perspectives.
Sure, and it makes the story very interesting that way as well.
Yes, it does. And leading up to the book that I just finished writing, there's a lot of collaboration as well. The central character is the person who shared the case with me. He actually is only about an hour and a half away from where I live. But there's all the facts that are written in the case file, as well as the interviews that I did with him, the experiences that the workmen went through, and some of his team members went through, so that it made it a full three-dimensional book.
Now, I started reading this book, your new one, just over the weekend, and I haven't unfortunately gotten very far yet. I plan on kicking it into high gear this week. But it's about a house that somebody's restoring, correct?
Yeah, it's what it is it's a mansion. It used to serve as an inn. It was built in the 1750s. And this is like one of those very opulent houses. It had 20 bedrooms.
Wow.
It actually has a ballroom. It has 2 dining rooms, a huge kitchen that you could dance in. I mean, it was just like everything you wanted in a mansion. So at some point, it changed hands, and it became an inn. And that's when problems began. It was during the Civil War, first of all. It was, and I'm not really clear when the Civil War battles were happening, whether it was when the mansion was already there or shortly, maybe perhaps built afterwards. But on top of the fact that there were tragedies that happened inside the mansion, there were also Civil War battles around the immediate vicinity. So you're talking about a layering of not just hauntings within the dwelling, but also outside of it.
Yeah, you got the perfect storm going on.
Yeah, and I couldn't believe it. When John was telling me this, and he probably went through about 6 different cases. And I'll tell you one case that I really pulled away from. And talk about, I've talked about this before, I think in a previous show. And I'll tell you this, that when you discuss these kinds of topics, particularly when you allude to something evil, it seems that, we live in a multiverse, and I don't know if you subscribe to that.
I do.
You do. So what I'm saying is that sometimes, even though you feel you're alone in a room and you're in the present time, there are other, I won't call them creatures, other beings, other spirits that might be in the room. And the ones that are negative get attracted when you talk about things that are negative. And as John and I were going through his case file, trying to pick a story that was very absorbing and riveting, we came upon one he had suggested to me to think about doing. And as he was talking about the case, the temperature in the room I was in, it was actually this room I'm in right now, started to get really cold. And I'm not talking air conditioning either.
Yeah, that's strange when things like that happen. I don't like that. I've had several things like that happen while recording the show. So it's not, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like they definitely, their ears perk up and their tails start wagging whenever you start discussing things like this. Yes.
And one of the things I do, which I even did tonight, is because I was raised Roman Catholic, I make a practice of saying the rosary. But even just a brief prayer to get protection, because you just never know. And in this particular situation, when he brought up the case, he explained to me it was active, that there was a lot of resistance, and that there was something that had happened very, very tragically to one of the children. And that really hit a chord with me. And then the room started to change. The feel of the room, the temperature of the room, I felt like there was a real heaviness. And finally, I raised my hand and I said, look, if you don't mind, I want to move on. I don't want to touch that case at all.
Yeah, that's a good move.
Yeah. And then we moved on to another. And then finally, this one seemed to me probably had the most spirits that were restless, but it was coming together to form one central figure that was responsible for all these things that were happening. And to me, that was really a story in itself, how someone had the power to destroy so many lives.
I'm so excited to get to actually.
I won't give it away.
No, okay, yeah, I'm excited to get in there, man.
Yeah.
I love that we got the little nugget, because I love the books that you write. I really, really love the books that you write, because you used to write screenplays and stuff like that, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I did for several years. And it's a different currency. Interestingly enough, I started in sci-fi. Ken, I don't know if you knew, I was a UFO investigator for MUFON. I did a stint, not very long, it was only probably about a year and a half. And we had some cases that got aired on TV, and we had a UFO flap. And it was one of those things where you needed more personnel to be able to investigate all these different things. We got to the point where the other gentleman, who was my partner, was going all the way up to Altoona. And I was on the phone constantly calling people while the facts were fresh in their mind. So at the end of that year, I had so many stories to tell and no one to tell them to. And one of my friends, who was actually from the UK, said to me, have you ever thought about writing screenplays? Because they're only at the most 110 pages. You know, one page is 1 minute on the screen. It's 110 minutes. And so I started writing them. I actually started writing sci-fi. I based it on the cases. I mean, of course, I did a little bit of poetic license, some creativity, as you say, you know, writing fiction. But the kernel of truth was there.
Yeah.
Some of them got awards. Some of them placed pretty highly. I was really surprised. And then I moved on to actually write about things. We have one that's about a werewolf called Romulus. And then I started writing about the afterlife. That was another screenplay that I wrote that was horror, about a gentleman that didn't know he was dead. And it went from there. But I think that the training helped me to be able to put together scenes that when you read them, they came alive.
Yeah, because your writing is very, I want to say visual, because, you know, when you're reading, to me, what grabs my attention is that I can get that clear visual picture in my head of what I need to see. It's like a movie playing in your head as you're reading, you know, and the way you write, I think, reflects that you used to do screenwriting, because I always get a nice clear picture when I read your writing.
Thank you. I'm glad you do.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it's hard to figure out like how much you're really able to convey and how much of the feeling is there in the writing. And so to me, you know, that's my challenge, to put you in the same seat as the people who experienced it, as if you were experiencing it again. That was my goal.
I think you nail it, man. I really do. I enjoy it. So, yeah, keep doing what you're doing, for sure.
I'm going to try.
So I want to go back to the heirlooms for a minute.
Yeah.
Was there any particular type of object while you're doing your researching and gathering your stories? Was there any particular type of object that you heard about more than once? Or, you know, I'm a pattern guy. I like these patterns. I can't help it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You mean an object that was recurring?
Yeah. Like, did you hear, like, I don't know, about multiple guitars that had attachments, or multiple lamps that had attachments? Was there anything like that?
I don't think I've ever encountered a musical instrument that was attached, or a lamp. There's something about chests.
That's interesting.
You know, where people store stuff.
Yeah.
And there's also something about paintings. Now, one of the stories there, and I don't know if you recall it, it's called the lithograph.
Yep.
It's actually a template. What they do is they take a steel plate and they paint on the surface of the steel plate and press it down on a particular type of paper to create a lithograph. And I guess this was a process that was done a while back. It was fashionable, and now we don't do it anymore these days. So you could tell how old the piece of lithograph is, you know, at least by the time period when it was made or used to be made. They tend to recur. I just recently heard about another, and this one is not a lithograph. It's a print, a sepia. So I guess that would make it a photograph. Photographs, prints, paintings. There's a theme to them. And it's funny because I remember, I think it might have been a novella called The Picture of Dorian Gray.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know if you recall that. Yeah. And I think because there is a theme that those things do happen with some frequency, And that's why that was written. Of all the stories in my compilation, the one that struck me the most, that was most haunted, and probably the one that I had nightmares about, was when Sam was telling me about how he grappled with the lithograph, that it was given to him as a gift. And what was distinctive about that was that of all the people that I interviewed, and I know these people very well, Sam really was so troubled by his encounter. I mean, it got to the point where he became a little bit unhinged. And I'm not trying to be unkind because I still keep in touch with him. But I think it really troubled him so much. It was one of those insidious things that played with your head. And I don't think I've ever encountered anything haunted that did that was that insidious.
Interesting. That makes me wonder, like, objects like that, it makes me really wonder how these things gain attachments. And because if I'm thinking of something that gains an attachment, right, it would, to me, you said you've never seen a musical instrument or anything like that. I would think somebody would be in life very attached to that musical instrument because, you're creating art with it. You're really at one with it. And after you pass, maybe that's the one thing that you imprinted on or whatever. So it's weird because it's kind of like there's not really a rhyme or a reason, or, I mean, for some pieces there probably is, but others it's kind of willy-nilly out there what objects have attachments and what don't. And I don't know, like, practically thinking, to me, if I was to see something that would get an attachment, I would think, maybe a piece of art that somebody constructed by hand and poured their soul into. I'm really surprised that there aren't more clothes, hats, because this is something that somebody wears, and that people love their clothes. Like a certain hat, a certain jacket, something like that. So it's really hard to wrap your brain around the reasoning behind those attachments, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And there's also a distinction, because there's ones where they left their energy imprint on it. It's not so much that the ghost or the spirit is attached or present in the object. It's more that they cursed it.
Ah, yeah.
What I mean by that is, a good case that's very visible is the Hope Diamond. The Hope Diamond was owned at one time, from my understanding, by a very powerful royalty. They did not want a man, I believe, to be wearing it. Only a woman can. And I really need to do more research on it, but because I never encountered haunted jewelry, I mean, right now, I don't know what I'm going to encounter when I travel next month. I might, I don't know. I mean, you never know what you're going to come across, but there's a certain vibration, and I'm a little bit more learned at this point, that if I'm buying something, I'm going to need to touch it first and stand around it and observe it. For good reason. When you're buying something like that, you want to anyway, and you want to see, if it's genuine, you want to see the markings, but also the vibe that you're going to get when you touch it, when you look at it, and, when you observe it. Can you discern something from it that's not visible? And the thing about a cursed object is that you might not know it's cursed until you bring it home and it starts interacting with you and starts doing something to you. Sure.
And that's scary.
So it's not so much that the spirit is still there. It's because they said something so powerful that later intended for that person to go through, it does happen to them.
I've always wondered why there aren't more cars that are haunted, because people gain attachments to those. But then if you think about it, if we're talking about cursed cars, then there are a few of those out there. James Dean's cursed car, right?
Yeah. And then think about, you were talking about Stephen King before we came on the air. Stephen King has this book that I think was a bestseller called Christine.
Yeah. Yep.
That was a cursed car.
It was.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because James Dean died tragically. He was young when he passed. And I noticed a theme that with these objects, the person who owned it died suddenly or died in such a way they didn't want to be dead. They had a full life and then something happened to them. You never really see something haunted with someone who had a full life that lived to the ripe old age of, 92, 98, 100. Rarely have I, to date, I'm not going to say ever, but to date, I don't think I've ever seen a situation where something was haunted and then looked past it to the history and found out that the person lived to a ripe old age. It's always something attached to a tragedy, something that was undone, something where their lives suddenly ended.
You're right about that. I think you hit that right on the nose,
Yeah.
So what do you think about this entire community out there on like eBay and a couple other sites that do nothing but buy and sell haunted objects? How do you feel about that?
Oh, Ken, I'm telling you, when you buy something and you're actually purposively looking for something that could be malevolent, I can't stress enough how difficult it is to remove that object from your life. What could happen to you? You could have an accident. You could come into misfortune. You could go into poverty. You can come out with a catastrophic illness. I don't even know why people would want to do. You're inviting misfortune.
Yeah, it's funny because, I was looking earlier at some of those things, and I have been ever since I read your book, because now I'm like, well, I want to see who's selling what. So a lot of those things they even have them rated like medium haunting, light haunting, evil haunting. I'm like, oh, come on. So it makes me wonder how many of those objects actually are haunted and how much of it is BS,
Well, it's a good point, but let me ask you this, okay? So let's say tomorrow you log on, you get on eBay, and let's just say you see this doll. It's a clown. And I hate clowns.
Yeah,
I don't know if I told you that. I can't stand clowns.
I hate dolls, so we're in double trouble there.
So you buy this clown. There's a guarantee that it's haunted. Arrives at the house, you unwrap it, you put it in, some room where you're going to display it. It's a conversation piece. A whole year goes by, nothing is happening. And people are saying, oh, look, it's a sham, yada, yada, yada. You are so intent and hoping that you see something happen with this clown. Your whole being, your whole mind is focused so intently, hoping that you will see something strange and bizarre. Even the clown moving, walking across the room. And guess what happens one night, Ken?
What happens? I'm excited. I'm listening. I'm ready.
The power of your own thought, trying to invite something negative, does happen.
Yep.
And something happens to animate whatever was benign before. And this is the other danger. I don't know how often it happens. But that's the other danger with people that are just, be careful what you wish for. It's basically what I'm saying.
There's a whole nother social experiment there too. Why are people so fascinated in seeing something that could be dark or haunting or cause trouble in your life or weird, bizarre? Why? I mean, I understand it because I like that stuff, but I'm not going to go to the extent of actually purchasing something and bringing it into my home. So I think that there's a whole psychology there. I want to know, I want to dig deeper into that, with some point and find out what that psychology is and what that means about that type of person,
And, it's puzzling because some people just wish for happiness, serenity, good times, being with friends. Why would you wish for something that could scare you?
Yeah.
Or isolate you? Or could do something to your house or your family? That is exactly very puzzling. It's almost like, I don't know, it's like you have this joy of seeing animals getting killed almost.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is almost the equivalent of it. Something bizarre about that desire. On the other hand, people are drawn to watching horror movies.
Yeah, I'm at fault for that. I like horror movies.
Yeah, I do too. On the other hand, we know it's a movie. We know it's not real life.
Right.
And we're not trying to invite something similar like that in our lives. I think when you're buying something and you're hoping that it's haunted, that's actually actively inviting it to do something to your life. So it's opposite of, some people pray intently. It's opposite of a prayer, because whereas you're asking for, something positive to happen to you in a prayer, this one you're asking for a curse or something.
Yeah, you're right about that. You're trying to make it happen,
So I don't know. Like you said, there is some kind of psychology to that. And, let's put it for instance, when you're young and foolish, which, we all were at one time, when I was trying to get rid of this armchair, this wing chair, we even had, she called herself a medium. I don't think she was a medium. I think she was just basically dabbling in the occult. And she brought out a Ouija board, and we sat through a session. And I won't tell you what happened. You probably know, having read the book, what happened. But that, again, is an invitation. And that was the perfect storm in that particular situation.
Yeah, it's weird what people will do. I mean, like I don't know. I guess that everybody's probably that way. Like, I understand the thrill. I understand that type of thing. But I don't know. Like me, for instance, I used to box professionally and did mixed martial arts professionally. And I love that. But I'm not getting on a motorcycle, because I'll kill myself on a motorcycle. And, my buddies, they make fun of me. They're like, you did all that stuff and you won't get on a motorcycle? And I'm like, no. Like, I'm crazy. I'm not stupid, Like, I know exactly what'll happen. So there is some sort of psychology behind that, because some people will look at that object from the outside and say, it's haunted. I don't want anything to do with it, but I'll look at it and investigate it and check it out and research it. And other people will say, well, if you'll do all that, why don't you just take it home and observe it for longer? So maybe that's kind of a weird analogy.
Yeah, I think so. I'm thinking about the current book that I had just written, and how there was an instance there, and the poor gentleman didn't know what he was doing. And he came upon a bone on the ground. It was the electrician who was digging cable, and there were bones on the ground. And he was interested in I don't even remember the name of the science, but I think he was interested in collecting, like, paleontology. Is that the right one? Yeah, he took it home.
Wow.
Big mistake.
Now he's got Frank's leg and he thought it was a dinosaur, right? I don't know about taking a bone home. If I came walking home with a bone, my wife would definitely be asking questions. So.
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. You know, it's like, get rid of that.
Yeah.
Don't bring it into the house, please.
Yeah, she would. That's what she says about my show all the time. She says, listen, don't be bringing stuff into my house talking about all this stuff. That's what she says all the time to me. Don't be bringing stuff in here. I'm like, it's okay. It'll be okay. So the new book, when does it come out?
Well, as we speak, it's actually just gotten done. I had put it down, edited it. I sent it to John, and John is the gentleman who provided me with the case file. And he's just checking it through, making sure that all the technical stuff, you know, because I'm not an investigator, you know that.
Yeah.
I'm basically a storyteller is what I am. So John is checking out the technical aspects of it because he is an active investigator and has quite a bit of cases. I mean, over 20 years of experience. So he's got all kinds of equipment that they had used on this mansion because of the sheer size. They actually, I think, maxed out and used all the equipment that they had.
Wow.
And at one time, he had a lot of personnel. You know, when he walks into, and I call it a building, I don't even call it a mansion, I call it a building. When he walks into a building of this size, usually there's a lot of people. And in this one, there was a lot of attrition. Even the construction crews, they lost 3 sets of construction crews in 1 year.
Oh, wow.
No one would work overtime. When they worked weekends, they only stayed until about 4 or 5. And, you know, once the sun started to set, they were fleeing. They were walking out the door. Time and a half or double time or not, they just were not going to do it.
Don't blame them.
Yeah. And you would think, you know, these are burly men, you know, gorilla types.
Yeah.
They're walking out with their steel-toed boots like, oh, no, man, I'm out of here now.
Hey, I don't blame him, man. I'm the same way. I don't play around with that stuff. You know, nature and ghosts, I don't play around with either of them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, for one thing, you can't see it. If you can't see it, you can't control it.
It's true. Very true.
So it really doesn't matter how tall or how burly you are or how tough you are. If you can't see your opponent, you've already lost. So in this one, it was like just a medley of people just walking in and then walking out. And, you know, some were brave enough to come back. Some would only come back during the day. But he ended up interviewing quite a number of witnesses as to what was going on. But the most difficult part of it was the property owners, the people who actually owned it as a corporation. And they felt they were losing money for every day that it just stood empty. So they were under the gun to try and produce some evidence.
Wow. So this guy he really is a good investigator. He really did his homework and did his research and talked to people and boots on the ground, pounded the pavement. And wow. That's you don't see that much today. You know, I think there's a thing of the past with all these paranormal groups that are popping up all over the place. You know, I think they just jump in there with their cameras and their high-tech gadgets, and they ignore a lot of the history and a lot of the personal experiences because it's not science. But I think that's a mistake. I think it's a big mistake.
Yes. And it makes sense more the more you delve into it to find out, you know, putting all the pieces together, getting all the collaborative evidence, you finally have a full picture of what had transpired and what made it the way it is. And I think that's when he realized that he had to close the book. He had to close the case. Because no matter what you did, there was nothing that would drive those spirits out of the dwelling.
Wow, I can't wait to read it. Now you got me all excited again. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to read it.
Great.
So I know this one's coming out the chute pretty soon, this book. I know you too well to know that you don't have another project in the works. I know that you do, right?
I do, actually, yes.
There we go. I knew it because, like I said before, man, you don't stop. You go, and I like that.
I actually had a few chapters of the book that's coming out next year. I think we have it planned for February 2023, about a young girl who turned into a witch. And this story comes to me through some friends who lived and rented a Victorian home where the girl used to live. So it's called The Talisman.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that's the next project.
Awesome.
But I'm going to take a break first and then launch into that.
Yeah, you need a little break, man. You're firing these things off faster than I can read them anymore. I don't mind. I mean, I'm not complaining, but it's you. Like I said earlier, you're one of the hardest working paranormal authors out there, man. You really. I don't know where. Well, you don't have a million kids, and I do, so that makes it a little bit easier.
You do.
Yeah. Like I said, I lock them away in the cage every once in a while and do the show.
Yeah. And my stepson is grown, so, he gets to enjoy the books and, talk about it and say, hey, when are you writing the next one? So I have a cheering section between him and my husband, but I don't have small kids anymore like you do.
Yeah. So, Anna, where can everyone find you on the web, on social media, and where can they find your books and purchase them?
My books are on Amazon, but they're also on my website. So AnnaMariaManaloAuthor.com is the website that I have. It also has a blog that I put weekly stories in. I also have a podcast, which is basically a storytelling podcast. I tell a story, a true story, once a week. It's on YouTube. It's on Spotify.
I love it, by the way.
You do?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's awesome.
Oh, great. I'm glad you've heard it. I try to keep it brief. You know what I mean? I do have one that I got cut off today. I was trying to tape it and realized I was running out of time. So it ended up in 2 parts. So everybody's got a cliffhanger now.
Yeah. Oh, shoot.
But so it's also on Amazon, and people can also find me on Facebook, on Instagram, and once in a while I'm on TikTok.
Awesome. Well, all right, Anna, I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking to me about, these new books that you have out and what's coming out next for you. And it's always a pleasure talking with you. I absolutely love talking with you because I usually find myself laughing and having a good time. So I really enjoy that you come on my show.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. And once again, I do enjoy talking to you. You're a wonderful interviewer, great host.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, Anna. Well, you have a good night, and thank you again.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.